Now we've come to the part where you actually get to type something into your worksheet. We're going to start at cell A1 and type in the word first. Hit enter, type second, enter, third, enter, fourth, enter, and fifth. I make lots of mistakes when I work, and I like to be able to correct those mistakes as efficiently as possible. Excel comes with a great tool to help me do that. It really is my best friend. It's called the undo button. You'll find it right here. The undo button just peels you back in time. Every time you click it, it goes back one step and reverses what you did. So since the last thing I did was type fifth, clicking the undo button peels that off. Click it again, fourth goes away, again, third goes away, and so forth. Just to the right of the undo button is the redo button. This button redoes what you just undid. You click it, it puts back in second, again, there's third, fourth, fifth. To the right of these buttons, you'll see a little drop-down arrow. The drop-down arrow here will list all of the things that we did, starting at the bottom and working to the top. Here you can see in A1 we typed the word first, then second, then third, then fourth. By selecting an item in the list, we can reverse back to that moment in time, peeling off everything from the top down to that point. So if I click here, I'll undo everything that I did right after the first cell. The redo button also has that drop-down list where I could select everything and put them all back in at the same time. Okay, great. Now that we know how to fix our mistakes, let's see if we can't go make a few. We're going to select all these cells, just hold the mouse down and drag down to select everything, and then hit delete on the keyboard to wipe those all out, and then we're going to start in cell B2. The active cell is the cell into which whatever you type is going to go. And you can tell the active cell in this case by the black border that goes around cell B2. So let's get to typing. I'm going to type in January. And notice that as I type, you'll see a cursor inside flashing to the right of the Y. That cursor tells me that this cell is currently under edit. I could also tell that this cell is under edit by the word enter and the status display at the bottom of the screen. Another good way of telling is that most of the commands on the ribbon are now grayed out, meaning they're not available. Okay, we can see that we're in edit mode, but what does that mean? Well, it means that you're typing in the cell, and you can use your backspace key to delete part of the contents of the cell. You can type in the cell. You can click your mouse in the cell and reposition your insertion point. In this case, I'll just click to the right of the N and hit the delete key to take out the rest of the word. When I'm finished typing, I'll just hit Tab to move one cell to the right. Now that I've finished editing the cell, all the commands come back on the ribbon, and the word Ready appears in the status display. Let's do another one. We'll type FEB. This time I'd like you to notice the formula bar. As you type in a cell, the formula bar displays the contents of the cell as you type. The formula bar and the active cell are linked together. The formula bar always displays the contents of the active cell. If that's true, I should be able to hit Tab, go into cell D3, and just type something in the formula bar and have it appear in the cell. Let's try that. I'll click in the formula bar and type MAR, and sure enough, you see March appear in the cell. Hit Enter, just like that. We'll go over to cell A3, select that cell, and type in Bob, Enter, Jim, Enter, and Sam. Enter. Hitting Enter moves the active cell down. So far, everything we've typed fits nicely in the width of the column. In this next part, we're going to type in a title that's longer than the column is wide. In cell A1, we'll type Muddy Run Whitewater Rafting. When you hit Enter, you can see that the entire text spills out across columns A, B, C, and part of D. Now the question is that text actually in cell B1, C1, and D1? Well, let's find out. We'll go to cell B1 and look in the formula bar. Remember, the formula bar always displays the contents of a cell. And, well, don't you know, there's nothing there. I'm going to use the right arrow key to move one cell to the right. Cell C1 is also empty. D1 is also empty. Left arrow back to A1, and there you can see that the entire text is all typed into one single cell. It just spills out into the other cells. They borrow it. It's sort of an optical illusion. It looks like it's in there, but it really isn't. Now, what happens if you type something in cell B1? Well, let me just type a 2 in there and hit enter. Now that that cell is being used, Excel can no longer borrow that for Muddy Run Whitewater Rafting, so it just cuts off that word. If I go back up and delete the contents, just hitting delete on the keyboard, now Excel is free to express itself, and Muddy Run Whitewater Rafting can just breathe right out into those cells. We're going to do some simple formatting here, just applying bold to the word January. Click B for bold in the font group of the Home tab. Then go to February and repeat that by clicking B. March, and the same thing. Now here we've selected 3 individual cells and applied bold at 3 separate times. Now we're going to try this with Muddy Run Whitewater Rafting. I'm just going to click once on the word muddy in cell A1. Remember that this text is actually completely contained in that one cell, even though it appears that it's spilling out into the other cells. If I click the B for bold now, you should see it applied to the entire text. Now, what if I wanted to apply some special formatting to the words white and water without affecting the words muddy run and rafting? I'd have to be able to get inside that cell, select just those 2 words, and then apply the formatting just right there in that specific instance. How would I do that? Well, there's a couple ways. I could double click in the cell A1, and this positions my flashing cursor in there, and then I can just click any place in there and just select what I'm looking for. That's one way to do it. I'm just going to press Escape on the keyboard to abandon that edit. Another way I could get into edit mode would be to hit F2 on the keyboard. This also places the flashing cursor in there and allows me to just go in and select specific text. I could also do this from the formula bar. Once more I'll hit Escape, and I'll just go up into the formula bar, click and drag. Now there you just saw 3 different ways to get into the cell to edit it. I'm going to hit Escape again, hit F2, drag the mouse across water and white, and then if you look right above the selected text, you can almost see, what is that there? Oh, there it is. As you move your mouse a little closer to it, you see this Mini Toolbar appear. The Mini Toolbar contains some of the most common formatting commands: bold, italic, font color, increase and decrease font size, the font size drop-down list, and the ability to change the font itself. Now, working so close to the ribbon, you might wonder, why would I ever need that? But hey, if you're working way down here and you want to make a selection, now you can just go right here and apply your formatting without having to take your mouse and swing it way north here. Now, while we're doing the formatting, I'd like to apply format to all 3 of these months. We'll select them, go to the font group of the Home tab, and click on the little fill color button with the yellow swatch under it to apply some yellow background color. When you apply formatting to a cell, Excel treats the formatting as a separate entity from the actual contents of the cell. In other words, the words January, February, and March are treated as one thing, while the yellow and the bold is treated as something different. We can really see this demonstrated if we select the cells and hit delete on the keyboard to delete the contents. January, February, and March disappear, but the yellow stays behind. It's not quite as apparent, but the bold stayed behind as well. If I type something in this cell, you can see that it still has bold applied to it. So the question is, if I can use delete to delete the contents of the cell, what key could I use to get rid of the formatting on the cell? Well, the answer is there's no key for that, but there is an option in the editing group of the Home tab. If you select the contents of the cell and then go to the Clear button, you could choose Clear Formats. This takes out the yellow, and it also takes out the bold. Now, there were other options there, so let's take a look at those. I'm going to hit the Undo button to put back everything in that cell. Here we go. Clear All clears the formatting and the contents. Clear Formats just clears out the yellow and the bold, or any other formatting that might be there, and leaves the text behind. Clear Contents is the same as hitting delete on the keyboard. The other 2 guys we're not too interested in at this point. So far we've talked about selecting single cells, which you can do just by clicking in a cell or using the arrow keys on the keyboard. But now let's take a look at some selection techniques for selecting multiple cells. When you select more than one cell, that's called selecting a range of cells. One way to do that would be to hold your mouse button down and drag. You can drag down or right or even diagonally. You can start in any position, go to the right or to the left, up or down. Regardless of where you go, you'll have a bunch of blue cells indicating the selected range of cells and a single white cell that indicates the active cell within that range. The entire range of cells has a black border around it. Being able to select a range of cells is pretty handy. We saw this a little while ago when we selected January, February, and March, and then applied bold to all 3 cells at one time. So from this we can surmise that if you select a range of cells, any formatting you apply is going to be applied to every cell in that range. Let's do this range here, Bob, Jim, and Sam. Here we'll just apply some italics. Besides just dragging your mouse around to select cells, you can do sort of a surgical selection, I guess you could call it, or a strategic selection, by clicking on the first cell, holding down the Shift key, and clicking on the last cell you want in your selection. Everything between point A and point B gets selected. Here it is again. Click, hold down the Shift key, click someplace else. Sometimes you'll find it necessary to select cells that aren't right next to each other. You can do that by selecting the first range, holding down the Control key, and then selecting the next range, and just keep the Control key held down as you select additional cells. This might be helpful if you want to apply odd and even row colors. Let me undo that. From time to time, you might want to select the entire worksheet. To do that, click on the Select All button right here. Another way to do that is to use a keyboard shortcut, Control-A. In the previous video on navigation, we talked about how to select a range of cells and then move around within that range by using the keyboard. And I told you at that point that there was a good reason for needing to do something like that, and we've come to that moment now. So let's try it out. I'm just going to type in a 1, enter, a 2, enter, and a 3. Now without a selection in place, you'd have to either grab the mouse and click at the top of the next column or use the keyboard to navigate up there. But now I'm just going to hit enter and just allow Excel to do the heavy lifting for me. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the real great part about this is basically just being able to type stuff in a range of cells and never take your hand off of the keyboard. Makes it very efficient and very fast. Practice it a couple of times. You'll really come to like this.